Yan, hello everyone. Kamusta kayo dyan, mga ka-Haydarian? Nagka-spacers, ka-YouTubers, yan, ka-Metas, joining us from different platforms, platforms. Ito, mabilisan lang pag-usapan natin yan. Of course, medyo weekend na at mukhang malakas na naman ang ulan. So, baka mag-adjust na naman tayo ng mga schedules dito. But let me just give an overview of things that we should expect or not expect dun sa upcoming State of the Nation address of President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. next week. So ilan araw na lang, ramdam niyo na ba ang excitement ng taong bayan sa mga achievements ng ating minamahal na Pangulo, no? Our very competent, world-class El Presidente. Yan, malapit na. Very quickly pag-usapan natin. Actually, I was hoping to do a proper critical review of the Oppenheimer movie. But siguro the best thing we can do for now is please just check out my latest Substack entry on that. Medyo detailed essay ang sinulat natin, longer than my usual columns. So you'll see a lot there. I'll talk about Sanskrit, Hindu culture and verses. We talk about geopolitics of the new Cold War. We talk about human psychology. We talk about envies and personal relations. We talk about quantum mechanics. So lahat yan, diniscuss ko na yan dun sa review ko ng Oppenheimer. So please check it out. Maybe we can do a proper full review, critical review of the movie soon. Although the movie itself is based on the book The American Prometheus. Na I felt lang medyo weird lang na Greek mythology ang reference point, considering that, first of all, I think more Sisyphus than Prometheus, no, ang dapat reference point dito, considering the kind of moral dilemma that he was facing. Spoiler alert, this was about preparation against Nazi Germany, but it ended up really preparations against Soviet Union. I mean, it's not really spoiler alert, kasi sayang yan, dapat alam niyo na yan. But for me, dapat more Indic, Hindu ang mythology rather than Greek mythology, because as Oppenheimer himself said, he was a greater fan of Hindu mythology because he felt it was deeper and more profound. And it was more in line dun sa kanyang understanding of quantum mechanics, because medyo non-linear yung conception of time at iba yung conception of guilt dun sa Judeo-Christian traditions. No? So I discussed all of those issues, multi-layered doon sa movie. Of course, for me, there were a number of big concerns I had with the movie. One of the big concerns I had was that parang hindi pinapakita ang mga biggest victims of the atomic bomb. You can guess what. Of course, that's one spoiler alert slightly. Another spoiler alert also, I felt that there was an overplaying and scapegoating of a single individual. Again, I don't want to do more spoiler, rather than a proper critique of the American industrial military complex at the onset of Cold War. So I just felt there were also problems, gaps with the dramatization and character development. Not the Cillian Murphy character, but the other major actor and major character in this movie who will end up as the villain that will be blamed for the troubles that Oppenheimer goes through during the McCarthyist red tagging era in the United States. Okay, I don't want to give more spoilers, but please check it out. Dun sa Substack, libre lang po yan. Walang monetization. You can just subscribe for free dun sa ating Substack, where I reflect on things that don't come up normally in my mainstream writings. So the previous entry was on Prigozhin and why I believe the coup failed. And I also give an academic literature. Ito naman is about Oppenheimer. So let's go. I am not sure I'll write something on Barbie, but expect me to write on something, on interesting topics dun sa Substack natin. It's like a personal blog in many ways. So libre lang mag-subscribe. Please check out yung Substack natin, Richard Haydarian Substack. Mabilis lang yan. Madali lang yan. So if you're on Twitter, if you're on my Facebook and Instagram, and also now Thread, you can see the link to my article, Oppenheimer, a critical review. Alright? Now, back to this. Mabilis lang, pag-usapan natin yan. So, kamusta? Kamusta yung first year ni Marcos Jr.? What are we gonna expect? No? Now, as I said, there are two radically different ways of understanding Marcos Jr.'s first year in office. One way is to look at it from the prism of what is expected out of a Filipino president in a nutshell. And the other one is what you can call reference biased understanding of what Marcos Jr. was supposed to bring to the table. No, so If ikaw ay nag-expect, no, na ang isang presidente ay super may klaro, coherent vision on economic transformation of the Philippines, new golden era, etc. Ang bigas po ay 20 pesos, 'di ba? Maligayang lahat. Well, let's just be honest, the past year was at best a mixed bag, no? Hindi masyadong nakamit, no, yung mga basic goals, including yung 20 peso kada kilo ng bigas. I think the cheapest is 40 pesos onwards, upwards. Hindi rin nangyari yung golden era in terms of all the bagong lipunan, bagong bayan, whatever, bagong bansa, all of those things. Well, I mean, a lot of kapalpakan and problems that we have in the past, it's still persisting, no? Not to mention all of these concerns about logo land and overemphasis on logo and performativity. Not to mention yung mga gulo sa loob ng administration, half a dozen cabinet members reshuffled. There's still concerns about how the cabinet is holding together. So, if you are gonna stick to the first perspective, I'm not sure how impressed you're gonna be the first year of Marcos Jr. But there's another way to look at the first year of Marcos Jr., and that's where reference bias comes in picture. The reality is that when you assess a leader, you don't assess a leader in a vacuum. Ina-assess natin ang mga leaders, ina-assess natin ang buhay, ina-assess natin ang mga relasyon o hugot. Depende doon sa karanasan mo previously, especially yung pinaka-immediate mo na karanasan. No? And this is where I think we can get very interesting reading dun sa first year ni Marcos Jr. No? Because kung ikaw ay umaasa na si Marcos Jr. was supposed to 100% follow Dutertismo and push it to its logical extreme, or that was your fear, then his first year actually in many ways was either breath of fresh air or a rude awakening, right? It has been a rude awakening dun sa mga staunch supporters of the previous administration who are not very happy with the policy departures they have seen under the current administration. But it has been somehow a breath of fresh air or relatively reassuring development pag tinignan mo yung mga recalibrations na ginawa ni Marcos Jr. So this is where the concept of reference bias comes in, no? So of course, if you compare Marcos Jr. to, I don't know, Prime Minister of Norway or New Zealand, or if you compare him to, let's say, love na love mo yung panahon ni, let's say, Pinoy, for instance, you may have some concerns. For instance, there's no anti-corruption initiative, etc. Mahabang usapan yan. But, if you were expecting na all the way province of China mangyari, well, that's not what's happened, right? If you were expecting na all the way na mangyari in terms of crackdown on the media, na ABS-CBN and Rappler would just be the opening act, and this will be intensifying, well, hindi nangyari. If you were expecting na the drug war will escalate, well, hindi nangyari. We saw the escalation. If you were expecting na tuloy-tuloy yung attack on liberals, on progressives, attack yung red tagging ay tuloy-tuloy, well, hindi nangyari yan. Now, obviously, disappointment yan dun sa mga loyalists ng previous administration, but dun sa mga critics at yung mga nagkakaroon ng almost PTSD last year, no, nung after the results of elections, medyo reassuring yung nangyari, no? May element of detox na nangyari over the past year. Now, for me, there are at least two major good things that happened over the past year. This is my stance, sorry na lang dun sa mga iba. For me, one great thing he did, kung hindi ka patriotic, problema mo na yan. Pero kung patriotic kang Pinoy, may pagmamahal ka sa bayan, one thing that you would really appreciate under the current administration is that he took, at least on paper, an uncompromising and tough stance doon sa West Philippine Sea disputes. Para sa akin, napakamahalaga yan. At magandang bagay yan. So as President Marcos Jr. said during his visit to the Asian Society, last year, his visit to New York, he made it very clear, right? The Philippines has no territorial conflict with China in a sense that walang basihan sa modern international law, sa UNCLOS, at dun sa arbitration award natin in 2016, yung mga claims ng China sa loob ng West Philippine Sea. So as the President said, we have no territorial conflict with China because what they're claiming has no basis in modern international law. What they're claiming is actually it belongs to the Philippines. There's no debate about that. So the position that the Philippines takes is that we have no territorial conflict with China. What we have is China claiming territory that belongs to the Philippines. I think that was great. I think that was important. So this is the position we take with our partners, we have promoted that position. So we have also made it very clear to our friends in Beijing that this is the way we feel about it. So very clear, categorical, uncompromising. And since then, we see that all of the mumbo-jumbo talks on joint exploration agreements, sa West Philippines, etc., lahat yan, more or less, tapos ang usapan, right? And perhaps that also explains why, under President Marcos Jr., he was not able to also get much out of China, even in terms of pledges, because clearly he was diverging from the line of President Duterte. I think that was one great thing that happened in his first year, that parang mas konti yung caveat. Because there are other things supposedly good, but actually if you scratch below the surface, I'm not sure about it. I would say the other big good thing that happened over the past year is that at least on the level of recognition of problem and somehow doing something about it, in fairness naman, we have a president who's not only the Secretary of Agriculture. Now we can have questions about how competent he is to handle that, but at least we have this very important initiative. Ito katulad ng kanyang pangako nung unang Sona, magkakaroon ng ameliorative initiatives to make sure na hindi mahihirapan yung ating mga magsasaka, no? So actually, the government is condoning close to $1 billion, no, on terms of incurred debts, yung mga utang na mga magsasaka. So this affects up to 600,000, more than 500,000 farmers in the Philippines would benefit from this debt cancellation or amelioration initiative na nabuo, no, ng kasalukuyan na administration. So according sa Republic Act 11593 or the New Agrarian Emancipation Act, it condones a total of 57.65 billion of unpaid amortizations, benefiting 610,054 farmers, tilling more than 1.7 million hectares of agrarian reform lands. Ayon sa ating Pangulo, genuine agrarian emancipation requires more than the distribution of land, but also providing assistance and services to the farmers. So the principal loans valued at 14.5 billion of the 263,622 agrarian reform beneficiaries, ito yung ARBs, whose name and loan details were submitted by the Land Bank of the Philippines to Congress, shall be condoned outright. The condonation of the remaining 43.06 billion pesos in loans of 346,432 ARBs will take effect upon submission of the details of indebtedness of ARBs by the Land Bank and Department of Agrarian Reform. I can go on and on, but I think this is a very, very important thing, mga kameta. Yung ating mga magsasaka, yung ating agriculture sector has really been neglected over the past few decades. And I think it's very good that we have a president right now that at least recognizes the problem, and so far there's something concretely being done about it, namely debt cancellation, right? And allowing itong mga ating magsasaka to have some financial breathing room para hindi mangyayari mga kababalakan na nangyari. Namely, beneficiary ka ng land reform, pero you cannot sustain the area, you cannot sustain the land, sobrang lubog ka sa utang, eventually babalik na rin yan dun sa mga dating landowners, no? Or landed elite, no? Or oligarchs, whatever you want to call them. So yun po yung nagiging failure ng land reform in the Philippines since the fall of the dictatorship. So you have the son of the former dictator actually coming now and trying to fix the problem. And so far, I think the kind of solution he's providing is sensible, but obviously not sufficient. This is necessary, but not sufficient. Which brings me to what really we want to talk about for today. Because para sa akin, in his second year in office, I think this will be his most crucial year yet. Bakit kamo? Because for me, actually not for me, tignan mo yung katotohanan. Ganito kasi, first year, honeymoon. First year, titignan mo kung anong levels of continuity and divergence from the former president, right? So if you're a big fan of the former president, you're so about it. If you're not a big fan of the former president, actually you have a lot to be happy about because of the recalibrations that happened and some very, very positive moves, for instance, on foreign policy front, on West Philippine Sea front. Okay, great. But ang katotohanan is actually, Marcos Jr. has not yet made final decision on a number of key issues. On foreign policy hanggang ngayon, hindi natin alam ano ba talagang laman ng EDCA na yan. Because the number of American troops which will gain rotational access to Philippine sites under EDCA, the nature of the weapon systems, anong lalagay nila, Patriot missile systems, artilleries, whatever. Sabi nga ni tatay, baka nuclear weapons, obviously bawal yan. But ewan ko kay tatay, saan niya nakuha yung mga ideas niya. But you see, those things matter. the details. The devil is in the details, and we still have not hammered out the final contours of EDCA. So dito talaga magkakaroon ng problema si Bongbong Marcos because in his first year, he signaled general preference for an expanded security cooperation with the United States. But it's one thing to agree in general terms, it's another thing to agree to specific details that have very, very particular operational and military implications, including for the West Philippine Sea and Taiwan, and by extension, for our relations with China. So dito pa lang nakikita natin na si Digong, yung mga ibang elements na malapit sa China, they're pushing very strongly against EDCA, or in hopes that either they can scupper the whole deal, or at the very least, force Marcos Jr. to take a more minimalist stance on EDCA, meaning there will be expanded American presence, but nowhere close to significant enough to change the geopolitical dynamic, whether on Taiwan or the South China Sea and West Philippine Sea. So that's one issue na potentially he'll have to address in the coming months in his second year in office. The second one ay yung ekonomiya, right? Now, medyo naswerte siya last year because of the revenge spending. Dahil sa revenge spending, we were able to maintain high economic growth rate. And that high economic growth rate, in many ways, was able to kind of compensate for the inflation spike and other kinds of problems that we're facing. As a result, kung titingnan mo yung unemployment and underemployment in the Philippines, as bad as it is, it's nowhere as bad as what we see in Argentina, Turkey, many emerging markets. In fact, even our inflation rates is not even in the top 20, 30 countries on earth, right? In fact, our inflation rate is even lower than some of the more developed countries, including, I think, the United Kingdom, for instance, or some European and developed countries out there. So, as bad as things were last year, thanks to high economic growth rate, the Marcos administration can still come out and say, well, growth rate was high, unemployment was still kept under control, and inflation was not too bad, and by the way, the inflation is slowing down. So that will be the line of the administration and President Marcos Jr. in his Sona on Monday. Absolutely for sure he's going to say something like that, except even more flowery, more self-serving. But next year magkakaroon ng problema, or second year niya, because nagsislow down na yung economy natin. So as much as we want to welcome reduction in inflation, ang tanong ngayon is, ano yung mga concrete na pwede niyang gawin para tulungan talaga yung taong bayan? Because the Philippines has the highest unemployment rate among key economies of ASEAN. We have very high double-digit underemployment rate. And even if inflation goes down, our economic growth is not inclusive. It's not really benefiting the vast majority of Filipinos in the ways it should. And the only way we can do that is if mapalakas natin yung mga industriya natin, manufacturing sector. If we bring in investment, not only pledges, but investments in semiconductor industry, in more high-tech industries, in more manufacturing-driven industries. Mahirap yan. We have to convince investors. So, hindi pwede hanggang logo lang, hanggang new tourism branding campaign. Hindi pwede yan. We have to really make significant strides in terms of fiscal sustainability, in terms of bureaucratic red tape, in terms of providing incentives like bringing down utility costs and other kinds of problems that has prevented and dissuaded international investors from coming to the Philippines. Mahirap po yan. But at the very least, expectation natin in the second year of office of Marcos Jr., he pushes for some sort, or he should rather push, I'm not going to vouch for him, but he should push for some sort of reforms that signals to the international community that we are here for high-quality investment. We're here for semiconductor production. We're here for more high-end, artificial intelligence-driven, fintech-driven kind of investments. That we're here to build more of foreign, international, multinational, whatever cars. That we're here even open to Tesla and other kind of cutting-edge industries. Na hindi lang tayo hanggang low-end services, hanggang retail, hanggang mga, hanggang mga very low-quality growth na meron tayo over the past decade or so. With all due respect to the previous administration, even though growth went up, the quality was always low. So we really have to up the quality. But how are you going to do that if you don't address some fundamental problems? And that's where we're going to also watch very carefully anong impact itong Maharlika Sovereign Wealth Fund. Is it going to be big enough to make any dent, positively or negative? And more importantly, in terms of public relations, will the Maharlika Sovereign Wealth Fund exacerbate or improve perceptions of corruption in the Philippines? Because yung perception of corruption in the Philippines is actually not very good, no? Isa tayo sa mga most corrupt countries dun sa mga international corruption indices that nakikita natin yan. So Transparency International, etc. Pinag-usapan na yan. So, tignan natin yung mga key initiatives ng government. Are they gonna help us in the right direction? Are they gonna send the right signal to the international community investors, right? So those are very important things. But the third, and I think the most important, at least politically speaking, challenge for Marcos Jr. will be the management of what I called more than a year ago as cartel politics, or essentially intra-coalition dynamics, no? Nakita natin earlier this year, open spats between key allies of the president after the, unceremonious demotion of former President Arroyo in the ranks of the congressional leadership. And then more recently, we saw this weird episode of Duterte going to China and doing his own diplomacy without any kind of heads up, it looks like, to the DFA, right? Although BBM tried to downplay both situations, saying the Arroyo one was run of the mill, and then saying to Sara that he's still her number one fan, and then telling the Duterte one, thank you, sir, for helping with the escalation. But we know that the reality is that we're seeing tensions within the so-called unity. And management of those tensions will very much depend on how Marcos Jr. deals not only with economic issues, but more importantly with two issues. One is what we already mentioned, yung foreign policy, US-China, EDCA, clearly because two former presidents who are still influential in the Philippines are invested in a stronger relationship with China, and they don't want the Philippines to too much tilt into the American orbit or align with the US. So the EDCA issue will continue to be divisive and difficult, and Marcos will have to constantly hedge and pivot on that and calibrate on that. But the other one will be the ICC issue, and by extension also the DILIMA issue, human rights issues, the whole red tagging problem issue, because again, that also has implications in terms of Marcos' relationship with the former president and some of the powerful families, right? And powerful officials who are still in office or will influence and were implicated in one way or another in the aggressive policies of the previous administration, namely on war on drugs. O mahirap yan, hindi yan madali. And I think it's really in the second year that Marcos will have to come to terms with this. Is this going to be a year of political reckoning? Perhaps, more than 50% chance. But my sense is the instinct of Marcos Jr. is to kick the can down the road as much as possible because he is temperamentally non-confrontational, and as much as possible, ang gusto niya is, quote-unquote, unity. Can he sustain that? Well, that's important because 2024 is essentially the year that sets the tone for 2025, which is the midterm elections. And the midterm elections in 2025 will set the tone for the remaining years of Marcos. So essentially his legacy years from 2025 all the way to 2028. So arguably 2024 is the most important year, the second year of Marcos, because it will determine whether who will be the opposition in 2025. Because if the opposition is, you can guess who, then that could set a very difficult direction for his politics in the remaining years. But if he can keep the unit team together, marginalize the opposition, and consolidate his base and build a supermajority, even a stronger supermajority after 2025 midterm elections, then he'll be in a very strong position to end on terms that is not only good for him, but good for the Marcoses. And the full rehabilitation projects will be completed, something that I and Attorney Carranza discussed. Remember our talk yesterday on the ICC issues, among other. Okay, I'll end on that note. Thank you very much. I hope you appreciated itong discussion natin. There's so many dynamics at play here. But ayan na, pagod na ako. But as I said, things are going to be very difficult. Things are going to be very challenging. First year was honeymoon, but the real reckoning may come this year. Marcos may not want the reckoning soon, but it's not about what you want. It's about how politics operates, especially in countries like the Philippines. On that note, thank you very much. Sorry, it looks like I'm getting tired now. That's my immune system saying it's time to rest. Thank you again for everyone joining us on Space. Thank you for everyone joining us on YouTube right now, and also everyone joining us on Meta. Again, please check out my latest Substack entry, my review of Oppenheimer, a kind of a psychological, mystical, spiritual, and geopolitical and plot analysis of the movie. Check it out. And also, I look forward to your comments and suggestions and things that you think we should look forward to in the second son of Marcos. I also hope to see you guys on mainstream TV, among others, on Monday as we discuss the State of the Nation address. So maraming salamat and God bless, and have a blessed weekend and a blessed Sabbath day tomorrow. Maraming salamat. Thank you, and God bless the Philippines. Salamat again. Thank you very much sa lahat ng mga sumusuporta sa atin and have a good day.